Fans of a Horus Heresy, unimaginable psychic power, and doing nothing wrong, thank you very much for joining me for a build and model review of Magnus the Red, Primarch of 1,000 Suns Legion from the Forge World character series range. Here he is. So, those of you who regularly watch the channel will remember I did an unboxing video on this miniature, maybe about a month ago now. And the build is complete. This is a commission build, so it's not actually part of my own collection. It's something I've built for a viewer who asked me to undertake the work. He's all built, he's all ready to roll, and he'll be going back over to the US of A tomorrow. But I thought before I send him on his way, we'll take a quick look at the model just to show you what it's like. Magnus the Red, as all the Primarch models are there, and fantastic. Magnus the Red, I think, stands out as being particularly fantastic. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to showcase the model, talk a little bit about the build, share some tips and tricks around assembly, tell you what I did for putting together this complex piece, and then finally we'll finish with some size comparisons, because Magnus the Red is a big Primarch. I'm not going to cover off rules and tactics in this video for two reasons. Firstly, I'm a bit stuck for time, and secondly, I would consider myself to be something of a 1,000 Suns noob, and I think it's safe to say that Magnus the Red is a highly specialised Primarch in terms of how he plays on the field. So I won't be doing that in this video, but I do encourage you to talk tactics about Magnus down in the comments section if you'd like to do so. Right, without further ado, let's have a look at it. So, as is the case with all Forge World Primarch models, he comes in a two-part base. I think it's the case with all of them. Maybe not per Turabo, he's got one piece. But there is a detachable 40mm base with Magnus mounted on it. He also then mounts onto this scenic display base, which is a 60mm plastic base. There's an adjoining base piece, and then you can put them together with Leman Russ, depicting their epic showdown during the Battle of Prospero. Right, anyway, that's enough procrastination. Let's take a look around this awesome model. This is one of the hand-sculpted Primarchs that has been done by Simon Egan of Forge World. And even by the standards of impressive Primarch display pieces, this is something special. So here we have Magnus. He has his hand outstretched, projecting some badass magic of destruction, and this has been very dynamically realised as this rock blast where he's whipping up the matter from the ground into this beam of energy and fire. And we've just got the camera focus there to see that this is quite unlike any other part of the character series range. There's nothing that rivals this in terms of model complexity, or indeed, I suppose you might say, just the sheer impressive look of the thing. So yeah, amazing piece. Magnus himself is a brilliant model. This stunning senatorial pose, perhaps, or a majestic pose with his arm outstretched and magic in full blaze, or psychic powers in full blaze. And he's absolutely crammed with detail, both in terms of on the front and on the rear. So what I'm going to do now is let's split this into two parts. So I'm going to detach him from the base, and we'll then take a look at him closer. Now, on the base, there's this section here, which, if I can get my fingers in, comes away, and it's designed to do that. I've magnetized this for the client, so he can mount him on and off the display base. There's an additional complexity to this base because part of the rock sward, you can see it here, is designed to detach, and you take that away, and then you can lift Magnus out like so. Now, for secure attachment, you can see there's some reshaped milliput here, and there on the base there's a corresponding piece, and what I've done is I've mounted magnets into those 2 points, and when it goes together, this clicks into there, and then it holds them in place. It's not a rock solid attachment. I mean, it certainly won't drop to pieces, but as this is a display piece, it doesn't need overly strong magnets. And of course, because you've got fragile pieces of a model, I mean, these are quite delicate, even with all the pinning work I've done, you wouldn't want overly strong magnets to hold that in place. So we shall put his base to one side, so put it there, hopefully it won't zap us with any of its magic, and take a closer look at Magnus himself. This is an absolutely amazing model. Now there's a couple of parts that aren't attached yet, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but we're just going to generally look at the model. Starting with his head, he's got his signature obscured blinded eye, his right eye, and then he has this fantastic magnosorial hair. No nipple horns. Simon Egan decided that nipple horns were not appropriate for this rendition, but he does get some, we could almost call them knee horns instead. Beautifully sculpted hand, outstretched, projecting his psychic powers. You may notice that this is a green coloured finger. I had to rebuild this finger because of some clumsy handling on the part of the delivery courier, but I hope I've been able to recreate that well enough for the client. I'm quite happy with the shape, and I think once it's painted it will blend in nicely. And the fact that it's Magnus's pinky, it's not as obvious. There's a couple of other bits of repair. I've rebuilt some armour piping here with green stuff. That was actually a casting error on Forge World's part. And then I've rebuilt this horn here, which actually got broken as well in transit. But yeah, absolutely stunning details. And this model does blow me away. Not all the Primarchs are in best poses. It's a bit hit and miss, and some people like them, some people don't. I think in amongst them there are some Primarchs that look absolutely perfect, and they've been just nailed. Angron for me is one, and having built him now, Magnus the Red is a second. I think his pose is perfect. Let's take a look at some of the details. Lots of turgies, or turgies I think they're called. He's got a scarab belt icon with the Imperial wings, and then another one on his chest. A belt, a very nice scarab cloak clasp there. Lots of scrolls, and the detail on those is absolutely fantastic. All of his armour is beautifully detailed. The base as well, you know, got lots of glyphs on this fallen masonry. And he probably has the finest Primarch cloak of all of the models. He has these smaller scrolls, or perhaps those of the moment. He has the feathers surrounding his neck, a big collar. He has this complex horn array, and then he has a further icon on his shoulder. Nice designs on his forearm armour as well. You can see the head moves a bit. That's because I've left it unattached, and I'll show you that in a moment. That's to help the client with when he paints it. He has his weapon. I just forget his name now. There's a call out for someone in the comments. You could just remind us of what his weapon is called. Yeah, fantastic. And if we just put his head back in position, we've got these horns as well. Very nice array, and it really frames his head very well. Fantastic model, wonderful pose, absolutely incredible detail, really, really impressive. Right, so now let's talk about the build. Now, one nice thing with Magnus the Red is his torso is a single piece, so there's no separate legs. Having built Rogel Dawn, having separate legs is a bit of a pain and requires some additional work to get them all lined up, but Magnus comes as a single piece, which I like. All the detailing around the tabard and the turgies is quite fine, that goes together well. This arm has been pinned in place. The cloak has been attached with both I think a 1mm piano wire pin, and then that's also been stuck in place with epoxy. This arm here to help with painting. I asked the client how he would like it presenting, and he said, oh yeah. I said, if you want, I don't need to stick it on if it'll help you with the painting. So he said, oh yeah, leave it off. So what I've done, so it's ready for when he does paint it and attach it, I've mounted a pin. There's just a bit of tack there which I'll remove before shipping. If we take his head away, same thing, just put a pin in there and some tack. I put a little bit of a post on to raise the neck up because I thought it was sitting too low compared to the illustrations I had. So yeah, I think that works. In just made his head sit at the right height for me. Another thing I've done with the model, and again this was the client's request, is I've prepared the pins for the feet, but I've not actually stuck it in place yet. This does come with very firm attachments. I mean, these blocks are really good, but for me, particularly doing a commission build. There's no point skimping on the construction, particularly when it's a Primarch as well. So yeah, very, very solid construction once that's stuck. In the meantime, holds it nicely in place, so it'll be easy to take in and out as he's working on it and painting it. More pinning was done, as you were probably not surprised. There is a pin that runs along the length, probably about this length of his spear, to hold all that together, because it just has a very fragile attachment at the hand here. So I did that for some additional strength. These large pins here, got pins on the brain. These large horns are epoxied in place. This smaller horn array has got a thin pin that runs down into his collar. And if we just take the head away again, you can see that. And it's quite a fragile attachment, so with some careful drilling work, I mounted a pin there. And it just means that there's no chance of that coming away in the future. Well, not without extremely rough handling. The sort of handling you can't engineer for. But apart from that, I think everything else was just stuck together with normal super glue. Beautiful piece. It really is. Absolutely stunning. I'm dead impressed. Really, really am. Let's now have a look at this equally impressive base. So we shall do a swap. So there you go, Magnus. You don't get to be centre of attention for a moment. Don't let your ego carry away with you. So this base is something else, and I think I would class it as one of the rites of passage of becoming a veteran Forge World builder. So you might have things like assembling a full-size Titan on there, building the lightning claws on Core Pharaon is another one, assembling a Land Raider Armoured Proteus, and now I'm adding this one as well, which is assembling the Swalls, the Energy Blast on Magnus the Red's Scenic Base. These come in a whole series of pieces. I just forget how many pieces now, at least 6, 7, 8 maybe. It's quite a tricky thing to assemble. It does take a lot of work. Everything's pinned, I think, apart from one joint here where it's so large and well defined. I decided just to go with the straight gluing. Everything's super glued in place, and I'm hoping that the strength of the resin will be enough to prevent any breakages. I mean, certainly there are more than enough pins to hold it. In terms of assembling this now, if you're working from the instructions, the instructions aren't particularly adequate to understand all the complex arrangements and geometries, and as you can see, it's quite a random thing. So I used, for reference material, I used the Forge World website and their 360-degree views of the model to look at it from lots of different angles to figure out how some of the more complex joins went together. The end result was really good. Yeah, very pleased with it. And as I say, it was a real challenge to build, but the end result is great. I also, once I got it together, I did some heat bending just to get it into this correct position. So when we put Magnus on, which we'll just bob him back briefly, we can see that the energy sword aligned with his hand. So he's directing it, yeah. So, and that's quite easy to do, to dip this into hot water and just gently position it once it's all stuck together. Another benefit of putting the pins in, because there's no chance of it then breaking in that process. As I mentioned, there's this detachable piece here which serves to clamp the 40mm base in place, and that sits on there. And I put a small neodymium magnet. I think that's a 3mm, is it? 3x1mm. I stacked a few in there, so it's probably about 2 or 3 in each section, just for a decent join. I mean, it's pretty firm. It's not like clamped absolutely rock hard if you're doing Titan weapon, but it's quite adequate for job in hand. So yeah. But yeah, wow, what a piece. Not easy to build, not at all, but the end result does look great. So putting that aside, a couple of things just to come back to on Magnus now. Again, talking with the client and asking him about how I would like this presenting, there's a couple more parts that are not yet attached. So firstly, we've got this second oath paper, and I've put a pin in the end, and this is going to mount into here somehow. There we go. It's like children and animals. Never try to do anything with delicately pinned parts on camera. And I think, is that supposed to sit under the... Yes, it is. Then that sits underneath his arm, like so, and it's fallen out again. I think you get the gist. So I left that off, again to aid with painting, but it's all for him to touch. And then the final thing is his book, which is interesting because it has a wolf on it. This must be his book of anti-wolf magic. Now, the observant amongst you, and I'm sure this is everybody, has immediately spotted there's a piece of metal chain here. Again, due to the oafish handling of the courier in delivery, one of these chain pieces was lost. So what I did is I bought some chain, and this is 1.5 by 2mm link chain, and I've replaced it. Now, again, to help with assembly, I've left it loose, and the client is happy, was obviously happy because he wanted the arm detachable. The book has to be as well. So once he's done that, he'll be able to attach this. This will just need some super glue running down it to put it into a final position. I'll also send a spare piece of chain, so just in case, in the unlikely event he has any trouble getting that on, he has got some spare material to work with. You get another spare part in the kit. This is quite a nice touch. You remember the belt clasp there, or cape clasp. You get a spare just in case you have a whoopsie cutting it out off a sprue. Again, another very delicate part, but a nice inclusion to have that spare piece. So yeah, that's the build. Let's now reunite Magnus with his display base of impressiveness. I can only think of that being a suitable name for it. Right, time for some size comparisons. Now, comparing Magnus the Red to miniatures isn't an easy thing. This is obviously on this big scenic base, but I've got a handful of comparisons and I'm hoping these are meaningful. Firstly, we have our dearly departed but never forgotten Mark II Space Marine in Crusade armour. And if we stand him alongside a Primarch, we just get the feeling for how demigod-like this demigod is. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, Magnus towers twice the height of normal Astartes. He is enormous. So there we go, Space Marine. Let's try something a bit bigger. Here we have one of Alfaris's chosen Terminators, the Linnean. I've not actually reviewed these guys on the channel yet. One of the many projects I've got to do. Doesn't look quite so tiny, but still dwarfed. He's big. So I think the only thing that really serves any form of meaningful comparison is another Primarch. Unfortunately, following the Linnean Terminator, we have this chap who will all recognise the Hydra, Alfarius of the Alpha Legion. I am Alfarius. I've not reviewed him on the channel yet, another project to do, but he is joining us in true stealth fashion to stand alongside his brother. Now, Alfarius is somewhat regarded as the smallest of the Primarchs. Maybe not quite the smallest, I think Lorgar's probably a bit smaller. But yeah, he's absolutely dwarfed by Magnus, and if we just detach Alfarius from his scenic base, and one more time do the same with Magnus, we can get a better comparison. Now, Magnus has got a great lump of masonry, but if we put Alfarius there, that's about height for height, and just look how big Magnus is. He's an absolute giant. He's a third taller than even Alfarius. He's huge. Wow. The only slightly odd thing that occurred to me with the build on Magnus the Red is you don't actually get a model for his range weapon, his sidearm. And if we look at Alfarius, we see he has his mastercrafted plasma blaster on his thigh. So a slight omission on Magnus perhaps, but something, certainly myself, I'm quite willing to forgive the sculptor for, given the incredible job that's been done elsewhere on the model. So yeah, a couple of size comparisons for you there. Not the easiest model to compare. Shall I try one more thing? Let's try one more thing. How about this? A Contemptor Dreadnought. Yeah, maybe that's a bit more Magnus sized. Yeah, that's saying something, isn't it? That you really need a Contemptor Dreadnought to get something of equivalent stature to Magnus the Red. Incredible. Right, well, Alfarius, I think, will make a stealthy retreat as he does, taking his Linnaean and the Mark II. There you have it. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns Legion, a commission build I've done for a viewer. I hope you've enjoyed this tour around the model and the thoughts that I've shared with you around construction. I do occasional commission work, and if you are ever interested in me bringing my resin whisperer skills to your model, please do get in touch and we can talk about it. Aside from that, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do share your thoughts and observations around Magnus the Red, and in particular I'll be interested here if you think he did anything wrong. And finally, I'd just like to thank the client who owns Magnus the Red for agreeing to allow me to make some content around this piece on the channel. So cheers buddy, it's been fun doing that. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.